Hello and welcome to a brand new episode of Not Another Whiskey Podcast. I am your host, Mitch Beshard, and I'm joined by the man who's as generous with his drams as he is with his words, Mr. Nicholas Polacki, who also wrote that introduction, as you can probably tell. Nicholas, how is everything?
Everything is very well, Mitch. Yourself?
Yeah, not bad, mate, not bad. Oh, good. Cannot complain at all.
What have you been up to?
A little bit of this, a little bit of that, you know, just hanging out in Speyside, waiting for it to get warm.
Well, Mitch, I won't dilly-dally around here because I'm really excited to get to our guest. Listener, we are going to be joined today by a person that both Mitch and I have worked alongside, and myself, I worked for, so I'm going to be in my best behaviour. This is a guest I'm delighted to speak to, as she's not only an amazing human being, but she's also the master blender of one of my favourite whiskies from the Glenrothes. Please welcome Miss Laura Rampling.
Thank you very much. You make me blush. Nicholas.
Laura, it's great to see you. And, you know, our kind of history between the three of us goes back. I remember you actually interviewed me for the Glenfiddich job because you and David Bittron played like good cop, bad cop. You were definitely the good cop, and he was the bad cop.
Yeah, he plays that role very well. I was going to say, I was listening to your interview with Kelsey McKechnie, and you were both referencing your interview process through William Grant & Sons, and I was, taking a trip down memory lane. It was nice.
Absolutely. I think
Can't believe Mitch got the job, to be fair.
I know. That was hardcore back in the day. Nicholas, you went through this as well. I think it was like 12 interviews and 2 presentations to get that role. It was crazy.
Yeah, it was extreme.
Yeah.
And then the full physical. You had to do the physical, right, Mitch? No, just me.
Let's not go into that a little bit. Holy moly.
Just say yes, Mitch. Just say yes.
But Laura, great to have you on the show. Absolute pleasure to have you here. And it's been way too long since we've caught up. I think for our listeners that are tuning in right now, it'd be great to give them a background as to how you got into the business. You know, this journey from running brands and marketing to being the whiskey maker at one of the coolest distilleries in Speyside. And I think the other thing, did managing Nicholas in the US make you run back to Scotland from America? Was that one of the main reasons?
Oh, poor Nicholas. Absolutely not. No, I loved working with Nicholas and Andy and you, Mitch, of course. No, not at all. It has been a bit of an interesting journey, actually. I get asked about this a lot, as you can imagine, because I don't have, the most typical path, perhaps into whiskey making. But as I say, I have a 12-year-old daughter now who you'll probably both remember when I was actually, before I had her in the States. But I tell her all the time that I think if you discover a passion in life, you can do whatever you want to do, and you can have many, many careers. But the key is sort of finding out what gets you out of bed in the morning, really, what lights a fire underneath you. So in terms of my path, I will praise it because it is quite long. But essentially, I suppose I always started my career in wines and spirits. I was always interested in that. I've always been interested in food and flavour and flavour development. I grew up in a foodie family, and I also grew up with a dad who, when he worked as a doctor, he got given a lot of whiskey. And I grew up in Scotland. I know I don't sound like it, but I did grow up from the age of 10 in Glasgow. So I am, a proper Glaswegian by heart, even though I sound like a weather girl. And
you sound like a weather girl, but you can still get in a fight. Is that what you're saying?
My hidden talents. I started in wines and spirits, but I actually thought I did languages at university. So when I naively stepped out of university, thought, I'm going to be a wine buyer because I'll go and use my languages, travel the world, buy wine. Did my wines and spirits exams when I first started my career, but I was on the commercial side. Personal reasons took me across to the States, and that's where I really got into whiskey. I actually remember writing a list on an airplane as I flew to New York to move there, and on that list was that I wanted to be in spirits, and I specifically wanted to work in whiskey. Landed in the middle of a recession. Don't know quite how I managed to wangle the job with William Grant & Sons, but I did, and ended up working there. And then when personal circumstances took me back to Scotland, an opportunity arose to work, to work on the technical side, to start my journey into whiskey making. It's still a little bit of a mystery to me as to why they gave me the job. It was a much more junior job, so I sort of had to go right back to the beginning, but I developed this interest in the technical side. I'd done the marketing side, and there was this opportunity that arose to work for Brian Kinsman, who I know you've also had on your show, who is a wonderful human being and an absolute wealth of knowledge. I have to say, I'm not quite sure why Brian employed me, because I really didn't have the relevant experience. I just had an interest, and obviously I was known in the company, but he did, thankfully. And then my journey was just, from a learning point of view, just phenomenal. I learned from him day to day, gradually took on more responsibility, and just totally fell in love with this side of the business. And I love the fact that it's a real mixture of science and art, and there's that, and creativity, and there's that little bit of magic in it as well, because you can't ultimately totally control everything. What happens when you put liquid in a cask is a little bit of magic, and so yeah, I just find it fascinating. I love working with the guys in production. I love working with the distilleries. I also love working with the marketing teams, and in this role I get to do everything. So yeah, and when the opportunity then came to move to Edrington, I took that. And then when the opportunity came to work on the Glenrothes, that was like, wow, winning a watch. I still get out of bed every morning and think, yeah, I'm a pretty lucky individual, because it is a phenomenal spirit, phenomenal distillery, amazing people.
It really is. And actually, that's a great segue into my next question, because it's, this is a brand that's really going through a transformation now that it's back completely under the control and the arms of Edrington. Obviously, yeah, for people out there that don't know the history, the brand used to be owned by Berry Brothers and Rudd, but the distillery has always been owned by Edrington.
Correct.
And now, Laura, like, this is wonderful. Like, you are now the nose and the rest of the face, to be fair, of Glenrothes. So
thank God it's not just my nose.
Well, Glenrothes was traditionally known for vintage expressions. Now it's moving towards age statements, and it's been shaped by that. So how does that kind of change what you're doing at the distillery and in the sample room now?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. We're moving away from that vintage model that Berry Brothers and Rudd had. Well, we've moved away from that. We moved to age statements, but that's not all we've got in our armory either. We are focusing on now very high quality releases towards the higher end of a whiskey range, of a typical whiskey range, that really honor the connection to the estate. So very well thought through concepts from the point of view of the marketing team, things that really tell the story, but that also are, have real meaning in terms of the liquid as well. What that means for me is I've basically spent the last 3.5 years gathering a very, very intimate knowledge of my stock, cask by cask. So I've spent
drinking everything.
Everything. There's nothing left. But joking aside, I suppose I've been playing quite a lot of catch up, but now have a cask by cask knowledge of what I have, the quality, the strength, the color, because all of our malts, everything we produce is natural color. When it comes to pulling what we need to pull together product wise and developing new products, I know what to draw on. It also means that I have no surprises when it comes across the bench to make a product, because I've already understood the quality. And if that quality needs to be addressed, I've been able to move the liquid around in order to improve whatever needs to be improved. So it's quite different from the way that I've worked before. I think it's a real privilege to be able to work on something that is relatively small but very, very, very quality focused, because I'm quite a detail orientated person. I love attention to detail. I love getting into the nitty gritty, and so the privilege of being able to do that and work at that very, very minute level of minutiae has been fantastic. And now we're at the point where we're using that to pull to create products. So we've got the strategy, we've got knowledge of the stock, and the two are coming together. So this year's, and from this year on, it's going to be pretty exciting.
I was going to ask you about that, Laura. That's, again, another segue. It's almost like you've written the script for us today, or you've seen it in advance. But Talking about that, you mentioned earlier that we've had a few master blenders and master distillers on, and I was just thinking about that there. Most of their background comes from chemistry, or their time served within this blending aspect of the whiskey industry. You've come at it from a different angle in that, you were marketing first and foremost, and then you went into the blending part of it. So how does that work for you? I'm interested to know, the brand managers on Glenrothes, are they a little bit scared of you because you're like, well, I'm making the stuff and also I know how to market it? Like, does that come into play at all? Are you still in that mindset?
They're definitely not scared of me. I mean, what a fantastic team I have. I'm so lucky with the people that I get to work with. My boss is an utter genius in terms of who he's recruited, I have to say. I think it helps. It helps that I can speak both languages.
Yeah.
I think that's the crux of it, because there's no rivalry. It's not like I'm coming up with ideas and they're coming up with ideas and we're clashing. We can work really, really well together, and I think that's where the beauty comes in. And I've had to get up to speed on all the technical side of things, and I've spent now 10 years doing this, so that's there, but having that, I guess, that ability to think in that way means that I don't shy away from the conversations with them. So I'm very well immersed in what they're doing. I'm very well immersed in their strategy, and that helps my thinking. Yeah. And then we can have those discussions together. So it's a very collaborative effort. We work as one team, very much. As well as I get to work with all of the guys in liquid quality as well. So the likes of my colleague Gordon Motion, who you referenced earlier, I think, on Highland Park, Kirstine Campbell on Macallan, and all of her team, Craig Johnson on Famous Grouse. So we work as a team, and then I get to work with the marketing team as well. So I get to speak all these languages, and and work together.
Fantastic.
That's amazing. I'd say, on that note, like in Scotland, we'll say, don't let the truth get in the way of a good story, but you don't really have that luxury with whiskey, do you? You kind of need to find that balance of how do you take what some people could see as being slightly dull and boring of, casks and barrels sitting in a dusty warehouse effectively, and make it a romanticized version of history. And I think people that truly understand what it is that we do in the business get that and know that it's both of those things together.
Yeah, storytelling.
Yeah, exactly.
As long as it's meaningful, then it's compelling.
Correct. And on that note, some of the things that people might not know about the distillery is the actual site, the Glenrothes distillery, has traditionally been closed to the public. Is this something that you think will change over time, or do you think Edrington Group quite like it being that little private hidden gem, and for now it's still, only those who've got keys to the kingdom?
Yes. There's no plans to change that. We're not opening a visitor centre. Yeah. Ironically, it is closed to the public, in inverted commas. However, there's a public walkway that goes through the site. So when you're on site, when you're up at the distillery, you see people walking their dogs past the still house all the time, because you can walk through the site.
There's a graveyard, isn't there?
Public access, and there's the graveyard. Yep, there's the graveyard that just sits across the burn, opposite the still house, which is called the cathedral, for a number of reasons. But yeah, so there's no plan for a visitor centre. We are hosting visitors, but it is invite only.
I remember, because of the graveyard, people used to say that the distillery is in the dead centre of town.
Yeah, well, there's all sorts of jokes. My the distillery manager, who's a wonderful individual, Ali Anderson, when he takes people around the still house, he says it's called the still house, and they say that if it's opposite the graveyard, the spirits are running on one side but not on the other.
There you go.
Nice.
There's lots.
I like that one.
Yeah.
Good old
stories about hauntings as well. Yeah.
Brilliant. Well, Laura, let's chat about the liquid for a minute here. I mean, you've been able to put your name very quickly on some amazing expressions of Glenrothes, including the oldest ever released to date. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
You're referencing the 50
Yep.
or the 42?
Oh, bit of both.
bit of both. Well, the 50, I think had Gordon's name on it. That was when I first came in. Obviously I was in roll, but he'd pulled the liquid together, and that was the oldest ever release that had to date. We released 50 bottles. I think that was back in February 2021. We launched that, and we released 50 bottles, and we auctioned the final 50th one for charity, and that raised £39,000. But if you're talking about the 42, which we have just released, which is a global release, and it's slightly bigger. I think it's 1,034 bottles worldwide. That liquid is mine. It's a composition of 4 refill casks, 3 hogsheads and 1 distillery puncheon from the 1980s. And what I wanted to do with that, the concept around that was around letting the distillery character shine through. So I'm sure you've, maybe you haven't been to the Glenrothes distillery, but if you're familiar with the spirit, you'll know, well, our new make starts very light and very fruity, very delicate, very elegant. What we're looking for is just real fruit. We've got lovely tall stills. We distill relatively slowly in these beautiful tall stills. So there's lots and lots of copper contact. We also use water that runs off our estate. So when we do take people around that have been invited, the first thing we'll do is take them up to our water source, which, you have to climb a bit of a hill behind the distillery, and we take them to one of the water sources. There are 4 water sources, and the water is extremely soft, and it literally bubbles out the ground. You can take a glass and try it there and then, and it's very, very soft. So it's got very low mineral content, which means you don't get a lot of tainting from the minerals from the water itself. So it starts clean, and that's how the spirit ends up, and that's how the whiskey starts its life before it's even whiskey. What we put into the cask, it's got this lovely fruitiness and this really elegant nature. So with the 42, what I wanted to do is showcase that style but at age. So showcase that true elegance. So yes, composition of 4 really exceptional refill casks, and you get that lovely fruitiness, sort of apricots and stone fruit, but you also get this lovely sort of delicate nature. So there's like an almond note that comes through, there's a coriander seed, there's sort of slight floral notes, there's the delicate vanilla, and then on the palate, that little bit of kind of wood smoke that you get from, it's not peaty at all, but that sort of, that slightly leafy, wood smoky note that you get from older whiskies. Because as whiskey ages, the influence of the wood sort of peters off at a point, and the evolution of the spirit in the cask takes over, and that's where your new make style really comes to fruition. And what I find with Glenrothes is it's so delicate, and it starts so delicate, but it's in a way really robust as well, because it can carry a lot of aging, can withstand a lot of aging. It doesn't lose anything. It has a wonderful nose on, at high age, and also on the palate, it doesn't disappear. Some older whiskies, you find they smell wonderful. You put them in your mouth and they sort of, peter away, I suppose. This has, a lot. It just withstands aging. It's got lots of lovely flavour, but it's also very elegant in nature.
Superb. So it's 42 years young, almost.
42 years young. Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
Nice. Very cool. Very cool.
What about any sort of future whiskies you have lined up outside the super rare range expression that you have? Have you got anything that Nicholas and I can go and buy that isn't 42 years old?
There will. As you know, and you'll get from everybody, I suppose, that comes on the show when I talk about future releases, unless the information's in the public domain, we can't talk about it. You're a few months too early for one, which is more affordable. So that's all I can say on the matter. None of it is in the very mainstream range, I will tell you that. But given what I've heard you consuming on your podcast to date, I think you can probably save up for this one. It's not quite at the heady heights of 42. It is younger than that, and it will be a part of the core as well. So yeah, just watch out for that in the next few months. It's if I say so myself, it's worth getting a bottle of it.
To be fair, Laura, Mitch hasn't bought a whiskey in 2 years since this podcast started because he just relies on the brands to sell him free bottles, and then he keeps saying it would come with my name on it as well. So,
oh, well, I'll ask the brand team very nicely for you.
It doesn't come out of his own pocket.
Well, I'd send you over, mate, but it's too far, you know. You can't send whiskey over to America, so suck it up.
I'll tell you what, come up to Rothes next time and we can do a bit for tasting.
There we go. I will absolutely take you up on that offer.
Deal.
Yeah. No, but and other than that, there are limited releases coming out, some really, really exciting concepts. But again, probably higher end, and just watch the space.
Good to know.
This next year going to be pretty exciting for us.
Very cool. Laura, I'd say Ronnie Cox is one of the legends of the whiskey industry, and a dear friend, Ronnie Cox Red Sox. When people did come and stay at Rothes House, he insisted that other people, the guests of the house, cooked him breakfast, which he then went on and scored. And did you ever see I don't know if you ever saw the journal.
Oh, not only did I see it, Nicholas, we continue that tradition.
That was my question. That was my very question. So, first of all, if you had to cook breakfast, what would it be? And what's the best Glenrothes to drink before noon?
Okay, I'm going to answer the first question. But I have actually had to do that challenge. Actually, I've done it twice. You're only meant to do it the first time you stay at Rothes House, which is the house that we would host people at on our estate. But I think I had to do it twice because the first time was when I first started the job, but there weren't that many people staying in the house, and actually it was before the house was done up. So and I can't remember what I cooked for that. I was and all I remember is I was completely unprepared for it because I think I got briefed by my boss in the car on the way up. And so I crept out the house at 6:30 in the morning to go and find ingredients in the co-op in Rothes, which, let me tell you, when I had high hopes of avocado and crumpets, and that wasn't happening.
Ronnie used to tell people, like at 11 o'clock at night when you were 10 whiskeys in, well, by the way, you need to get up at 4 a.m. and cook me a breakfast, and I'm going to score and rate you.
We're slightly kinder now. We are slightly kinder. And I can tell you that what I have cooked the second time when I had slightly more advance notice is I actually cooked my granny, my 105-year-old granny. She lived till 105. Wow. I cooked her pancakes, her Scotch pancakes, and I served them with some fresh fruit and maple syrup. But we also have to dress the table and flowers, place settings, all the rest of it. So it's turned into quite a thing, and we do invite our guests to do it when they come, no matter who they are.
Okay, so I'm never getting an invite then because I can literally burn water, so that would work for me. Right, Laura, moving on from breakfast here, we always have to like a little bit of fun with our guests and do a quick fire round, which you've probably heard of. So we're going to give you some quick fire round questions that may or may not be based around whiskey. But the first one is, so what's your favorite whiskey right now? One Glenrothes and one that is outside of your portfolio.
Okay. Well, I'd say in terms of one that I would be able to drink sort of every day, obviously things like the 42, that I'm going to kind of have to exclude those because whilst I have obviously tried them because I've made them, I don't have a bottle sadly in the house. But if I'm at home, it'd be Glenrothes 18, which is, it's on that week. I refer to it as kind of coming of age. So it's starting to really get that lovely fragrance that you get from aged whiskey, but it's still quite young and vibrant and bold. It's got high percentage of first fill, sherry seasoned cask, both American and European. So Glenrothes 18. Outside, there are quite a few to choose from. Yeah, I recently tried Glendronach 15, which I thought was superb. I mean, obviously back from my William Grant days, I've got a lovely also memories of and portfolio of their products. I do enjoy a Glenfiddich 14 Rich Oak, which
Mm.
is no longer produced, but I do have a few bottles at home. So that's one that I can still pull out from time to time.
Very cool. Laura, if you had to choose one Glenrothes to bring back from vintages past, what would it be?
I would say Ancestors Reserve.
Mm.
Ancestors Reserve. I don't know if you've tried that. It's from the 1980s. I think it's 1984. And it was a vintage done within 1984, and it is really delicious.
Well, that's cool. My favorite vintage is 85. That's funny.
85.
Yeah, the 85 is killer.
Right, Laura, where's the best place you've ever had a dram?
Oh, top of a mountain.
Which one?
Yeah. I mean, let me see. Recently, well, most recently, through COVID, I started taking my daughter up some Monroe's because she was old enough to, to climb some mountains. And so, yeah, the top of Ben Lomond's.
There you go.
Yeah,
Nice.
is the most recent one. I think whiskey tastes different in the open air.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
And at altitude.
See,
and
going back to your point, I'd like to take my daughter up a Monroe, but she's at that teenage. I know yours isn't quite at the teenager stage yet. Mine very much
same thing.
is. Yeah, so taking up a Monroe would be like,
pain.
yeah, it's like Kevin off Harry Enfield. Oh, Dad, don't want to go up a mountain.
Take friends with you. Take their friends.
Well, that's a good way to do it. Yeah,
and
don't promise them whiskey at the top. I would.
No, take them cake. Take you whiskey.
Yeah. So that's it. So you're climbing mountains in the regular. What music do you listen to when sipping your favorite dram?
Oh gosh, I have quite an eclectic music taste. I didn't expect you to ask me about music. I thought various things. I did not expect you to ask me about music. When sipping a dram, I mean, I can have music on in the kitchen when I'm cooking. When I could be also sipping a dram, it tends to be like funk. That might surprise you, but or
nice.
disco,
like the Meters and
jungle.
Oh, there you go. Very cool.
I mean, in the evening, if it's quiet, I do love classical music as well. That's that's kind of stereotypical, isn't it? But yeah, in the kitchen, first dram of the weekend.
Cool. Right, back onto a whiskey question for you. If you could make any whiskey using any cask, what would it be?
The thing is that we are relatively limited, aren't we, within Scotch whiskey? And I don't think it's all about the casks. Casks are very important. We use sherry seasoned casks predominantly for good reason, because sherry prepares the wood extremely well, doesn't take too much out of it. That being said, bourbon, you can get some spectacular bourbon casks as well. They are all individual. So, if I could, that's a very difficult question to answer, because I think all casks are unique, and no two casks are the same, even within the same category. So it's quite hard to say this. If it's really, really, really old whiskey in a very good refill cask, I think that can be absolutely stunning, just because it's not been overpowered. So if you're talking old whiskey, then a refill sherry seasoned cask is can be absolutely gorgeous. It allows the spirit to sing.
There you go. Would you rather have an 8 a.m. coffee or a 2 p.m. whiskey? Let me just preface that by saying 8 a.m. and I am drinking both.
8 a.m. coffee or a 2 p.m. whiskey. Oh, I quite like coffee at 2 p.m.
Oh,
so
really?
I might have to say whiskey at 2 p.m. I'm not really an 8 a.m. coffee person. So happy to do it with whiskey.
Love that. Well, Laura, thank you so much for being on the show. I think that kind of wraps it up for us. So hopefully those questions weren't too challenging and it wasn't too much of a pain to be on the show with us. And we really do appreciate it, because we know you're very busy with what you're doing. And next time you're up in Speyside, please give me a shout and we can hang out a little bit face to face, which would be great to catch up properly.
Yeah, I would love that.
And Laura, do you have any plans to be in the US to launch anything, or? You're going to be traveling?
I don't have any plans as such yet, but I have said to my boss I need to get back out to New York. So at some point,
Let me know.
I'm sure I will be there at some point. And if I am, Nicholas, you'll be the first on my list.
Fantastic, fantastic. Well, again, thank you so much for being our guest on 30 Minutes with.
Thank
This has been a
you.
blast to catch up and to see you. You look so fantastic. You're looking great. And we're, really proud to see the whiskies that you're producing. They're phenomenal and it's a great brand. So congratulations.
Thank you very much. It's been an absolute pleasure. It's been great to catch up with you.